Hello everyone, this video is going to be about the trickster archetype, and this archetype is very much embodied by a covert narcissist person who wears a mask and tries to fool people, tries to play with their emotions, tries to manipulate them with an agenda. And this archetype is what we are going to be looking at in this video. So, archetypes are basically energies which are very typical. Uh, we see them over and over again in different forms, in myths, in mythology, in stories, in media, and in reality, in people that we meet in life. And also, we see these energies within ourselves. So that's what makes an archetype. When an energy takes a particular pattern and we see that pattern being repeated, we can form it as an archetype. In tarot, the trickster archetype is represented by the Fool card. The number of this card is the number 0. So it is the first archetype, the first major arcana card, and it's really the starting point of consciousness, of a person's conscious decisions. So, as all energies, the energy of the fool or the trickster also has two attributes: its light attributes and its shadow attributes. So, the light attributes of the fool are fearlessly revealing emotion, helping people laugh at the absurdity and hypocrisy of life. And the shadow attributes are using humor to wound rather than liberate, denial of your emotional truth. So, as the card suggests, the trickster energy type, or at the energy type of the fool, is a very powerful one. It can take you towards the light, where it has understood the absurdity of life, and it has understood how to liberate itself, how to play a fool without being bound by the constraints of society. Or it has the other attribute, which is that this person or this energy has understood the intricacies of consciousness, but rather than liberating, it uses it for its own agenda, for its own gain, to wound rather than to liberate. Even in the animal kingdom, we see this trickster energy being used by many animals, birds, fishes, who use it to trick their prey, and that's how they obtain energy from the environment, by tricking the animal into a death, into a sudden death, many times a traumatic death where the animal does not understand what has happened to it before it dies. This article I'm sharing shows some animals of this kind, and the last one it shows is a spider which tricks its prey. This animal behavior was observed by people of different tribes, traditions, and in different geographies of the world. And they came up with their own trickster types, which are used exclusively in myths, mythological stories, folklore, etc. One such character is the trickster called as Anansi. He is found in West African, African American, and Caribbean folklore. His tales originated in West Africa and were transmitted to the Caribbean by way of the transatlantic slave trade. He is most well known for his ability to outsmart and triumph over more powerful opponents through his use of cunning, creativity, and wit. So, in some stories, he is the hero, and in some stories, he is the villain. The wolf in Red Riding Hood, or the coyote, which is found mostly in the Native American folklore, are more on the shadow side of the tricksters. The Native American's trickster reminds us, like no other, that humans, for all their pretensions to intellectual and spiritual culture, and for all their moments of bravery, altruism, and generosity, are nevertheless animals ruled by appetites and impulses that make them equally capable of cowardice, selfishness, and cruelty. In Islam, the trickster archetype is embodied by a mythical or mystical creature called as a jinn or a genie. It's given a very negative connotation in Islam, and it the story goes that a person who gets tricked by this genie actually becomes its slave. So the genie shows up as a slave and makes you the master and gives you wishes that you can fulfill. But in turn, it is you who becomes the slave of this genie, because the genie is a trickster. And what they are trying to show by this is that materialism or promises of this world can first look like you are the one who is ruling them, but slowly materialism becomes the master and you become its slave. In Indian mythology, this archetype is embodied in two of its most known epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. In the Mahabharata, this archetype is embodied by a man called as Shakuni. He is a very clever and shrewd man, very intelligent, and he's also a great illusionist. He always leads by logic and uses his cold logic without any emotion to play a manipulative game with his own nephew and poisons him to be against his cousins, the Pandavas. And the story is very huge, but overall, what he does is he creates a very big rift within two amongst two very powerful parties, very passionate parties, and in the end, there's a war between both of these parties, and it results in a lot of destruction. On similar lines, in the other epic of Ramayana, there is not so much of a war that happens, but there is a lot of deceit and injustice that happens because of the trickster archetype, which is embodied by a female this time called as Manthara. Manthara is the one who poisons the queen's brain and ultimately sends the hero of the story, who's a nice character, to exile, and a lot of things happen in the process. But long story short, she brainwashes or gaslights this queen into making a really bad decision, a decision that is fueled by power and agenda and deceit. And it's not the queen's decision, actually, it is this maid's decision, but the maid has so much of mind power over the queen that she actually is the one who's running the show but very behind the scenes, very like a covert narcissist. And she's using the queen as a flying monkey to make all of these choices. So that's how the trickster archetype is shown in Indian mythology, and it is made very clear that when people are unaware of this archetype, it results in a lot of destruction, both physical and emotional. In Western folklore, this is oftentimes shown as an evil stepmother who's jealous of an innocent girl's beauty or her morals or her strength of character or her empowered nature, and who wants to leave her in a sorry state. And to do that, she tricks this girl with a beautiful looking object like a juicy red apple, but which has been poisoned from the inside. And this leaves this girl in a state of distress as a damsel, where all of her powers have been taken away. The first transmutation that we see is not very light. It is what the trickster energy does to the innocent when the innocent is imbalanced. That is very well shown in the movies Joker and The Dark Knight, where an empath or a person and an innocent person who was fooled by the trickster, or in this case, the society as a whole, where the materialism and the manipulation and the hierarchy of the society is not helping a poor person or a person who just wants to make a good life for himself prosper. And what that does is it turns this person against society and for anarchy. So, this really is not a good archetype to embody, but we can definitely sympathize with this archetype because we see how it was come, how it came into form. And this archetype is one that wants complete chaos, complete destruction, and then the re emergence of a new world order. In Hinduism, this is represented by the god Shiva or by the goddess Kali, where they completely destroy the old and clear the slate for a new to begin. In its most balanced form, the trickster energy is one that has come a full circle. So, an innocent person who got fooled by a trickster has taken all of this in. He has taken in the understanding of Maya, the illusion of this materialism, the illusion of the niceness that people present with an agenda behind the niceness. And he or she has come into a complete understanding of this duality, of the wholeness. And such a person is simply living this life as a play of life and death, of light and dark, of good energies and bad energies. This is symbolized very well by very popular figures like Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean, in the genie that is shown in Aladdin, and it is also very well embodied by comedians, stand up comedians, who critique life with such a levity that it makes people laugh, and in the laughter, they actually hide these gems of wisdom or truth about life. So, what the trickster archetype teaches us is a lesson in wisdom, is a lesson in discretion, is a lesson in not believing everything we see or hear, and of having a more critical outlook towards life and towards people, to verify our truths instead of blindly believing. Gullibility is a trickster's best friend. They always target people who are gullible, who are vulnerable, who need something from the outside. The trickster archetype starts very much when a person develops manipulation skills in their childhood, where they realize there are children younger than them who are gullible, whom they can trick. If this habit goes out of balance and it becomes toxic in childhood and it is unchecked by a grown up figure in the child's life, it can become a child's way of operating in the world. And when slowly the child grows up, they keep the same habits of tricking, of pushing agendas behind covers, of using people as pawns in their own mind games, in their own plays of this life, of this illusion. They, in short, become the wolf in a sheep's clothing. So, what we need to learn from this trickster archetype is the lesson of discretion. That every energy that we see in this world has a good side and a bad side. If we see the world to be all good, our perception is incorrect. And if we see the world to be all bad, our perception is still incorrect. The world is a mixture of good and bad, and there is bad in the good, and there is good in the bad, and that is the law of the universe which we cannot change.